Upon your arrival in Modoc, you are unlikely to see anything that immediately catches your eye. In fact, disappointment may be your first real instinct towards this dusty settlement. Arriving on the unpaved, shadowy roads, I almost regretted foregoing the city lights of New Reno in order to make a detour here. We came to trade anyway, yet once I entered the general store, I was immediately turned away, regaled with a pretty improbable story. This is Sheriff Joe, both the prospector and, confusingly, law enforcement around here, and he's pretty shaken up. For one thing, his business is going under. It's not only that he refuses to trade, it's that something, otherworldly, his words, not mine, is preventing him from doing so. We hardly press him before he starts talking. He laments the fact that his community is made up of subsistence farmers, people who grow enough crop to trade with surrounding settlements and then eat it themselves, yet, recently, a drought has occurred. Not one caused by desert conditions or even radioactive fallout lingering in the atmosphere. No, its origin seems to be even more unnatural and unholier than even that. On a farm, no more than a day and a half's journey north of Modoc, crops have begun flourishing, yet no attending farmer is present. Water is being sucked from the ground, yet no apparent sign of irrigation exists. According to Joe, Modoc sent a scout out some time ago, a young man by the name of Carl, to babysit the homestead and perhaps, if the opportunity arose, claim it for the township. However, one day, and for weeks after, Carl stopped appearing in town, now a little nervous, but determined to find their fellow citizen, and probably still eyeing up those crops. The town organizes a search party and heads north. However, upon their arrival, they're greeted with something almost pagan. Bodies, in the tens of hundreds, litter the outskirts of the property and serve as a gory deterrent for the now terrified searchers. With not much else to do, and fearing for their own safety, Sheriff Joe and his men fled back to Modoc, never making contact with the farm again. And, of course, after basically pitching to you why you should never, ever go north of Modoc, he, naturally, begs you to go north of Modoc and check this property out. Or rather, he kind of holds you hostage to do so. You see, we seek something called the Gek. And in order to save our loving sponsored tribe back in Arroyo, that one. And through vague and unimportant circumstances, our friend and prospector here just so happens to know where we can get one. Seems legitimate. His desperation really makes me trust him. And as you probably guessed, this is of course for the price of some high-risk ghost hunting. We'll do it. New Reno has junkies, but where else are we going to see a genuine ghost? So we agree, not before hitting Joe with the most baffling speech check I had received up until this point. Yep, he's desperate, and set off, exiting Modoc 5 minutes after entering, heading for the now marked location on our map. Sheriff Joe wasn't lying. It is only a day or two's travel to the north, and I guess he wasn't lying about this either. Wow. It's quite the striking visual, especially for a game made in 1998. The darkness, while not doing it full justice, lends an aura of absolute doom to the already grisly scene. I particularly like the detail on the shadows, each suspended sprite being doubled in an odd and contorted state against the ground. The path to the actual farmhouse is pretty long, all the while marked by columns of these dead. We get to the main house, and the structure isn't anything out of the ordinary. In fact, if you came across this while traveling in between settlements, you might find it so unremarkable you may not even poke around inside. Entering the house, we're immediately confronted by another, less horrifying yet equally confusing conundrum. 3 footwalkers, 3 items, 2 of which we can immediately see. If you use the cursor and select pickup, you can immediately traverse to these items, adding them to your inventory. For what they're worth to you, of course, at this point in the game, I guess. However, when you step away from the chests and through the room's midsection, yep. I kind of find it funny that Vic's old, weak knees refuse to give out from that drop, yet while wearing Mark II leather armor, I'm half-winded in need of some serious morale support over here. But getting off the cold, hard, and likely ghost-infested ground, I notice there are 2 others down here. Guns trained on our party. Guess we're not getting out of this easy. Speaking with the 2 guards, they keep the vague theme of this quest line alive by demanding you come with them, imploring you, in a rather polite way for a couple of, apparent troglodyte ground dwellers with guns, to come with them, or, of course, else. We put up some verbal resistance, but ultimately we comply. Maybe these people know a thing or two about the ghosts, or maybe they just put those bodies up there. I mean, Doesn't really matter now, though, because we're already talking to the leader, who, instead of, makes a rather simple request given the whole gravity of this kidnapping situation, referencing the flourishing crops up above, which I sort of missed due to the, the leader tells us that they are, in fact, in possession of an abundance of food. I mean, clearly, with their stores at capacity, and they are looking to expand their horizons from this cave and trade with local settlements, MODOK being the first on their contact list. Relieved and a bit disappointed by the absolute lack of apparitions down here, I agree, only after a few choice questions, which their rather verbose leader, he talks for a while, provides. The skinny is that these guys are the descendants of doomsday preppers, a collective of maybe 4 or 5 families who moved into a shared bunker once the bombs fell. Naturally, travelers have come into the fray since they rediscovered the surface, or I don't know exactly what I'd be in for after 200-odd years. Eventually, their food supply became exhausted, forcing them to create a complex and unknowingly damaging irrigation scheme. They don't seem to know or maybe really understand that the water they're siphoning is from MODOK, or that MODOK may have to change their entire economic model if they're the ones that are receiving the food instead of, trading it. But that's unimportant right now. We're going to use this kindly placed ladder and go up through this little hatch here onto the field and past dozens of new friends, and then we're going to set off. Arriving back in MODOK, we find the town a little more welcoming in the daylight. Its wide and dusty streets projecting a bit of charm as we stroll on to see Sheriff Joe. Joe is sort of hard to convince at first, let's say. He's not really letting the whole impaled corpse thing go. And I guess there's the night terrors aspect as well. And not to mention, he's a little hard up about the whole missing persons thing. But if we've been to the den already and sufficiently poked around enough, we find the option to tell Joe that the farm's former caretaker and now apparent drunk is pounding his sorrows away at Becky's bar some few days west of here. He believes you. I mean, he doesn't have any reason not to, and he asks you to retrieve the man at your convenience, but is still unsure of what his position is going to be towards this group. Water is still being sucked from the ground, and the crops are withering, leading Joe to declare his own 30-day timeline for war on the Slags, which I probably forgot to mention was the name of this group. It's gonna be war. I mean, I want Joe to sell me some ammo, but that's kind of all I want, but I guess we better go back and get an explanation for this whole mass murder starvation thing. I can see how that would be a sticking point. Arriving back at the ghost farm, we can now access the Slag hideout through the field, the same hatch we made our hasty post-kidnapped escape from. Back in the land down under, we express Sheriff Joe's reservations to the Slag leader, directly asking his justification for so many wanton murders. And he's up front, telling us that we're looking at mere decorations, a sort of deterrent for raiders and I guess would-be drunks. The bodies aren't even real, being composed of Brahmin guts and various other miscellaneous farm items. Yeah, okay, but speaking of would-be drunks, did they actually do anything to harm, Carl? Once I retrieve him, will he contradict any of this? Apparently not, as the Slags assure me no real harm, aside from chronic addiction and trauma, I suppose, came to him. I'm not really in a position to argue here, and neither are the people of MODOK. We take the story, evidence and all, and once more leave the ghost farm. Back at Joe's storefront, we find the sheriff preparing to attack the Slags still, declaring only 28 days left on his timeline. Guess we dilly-dallied a bit. We're kind of unmoved because factional war is fake and gay, and we tell him about the whole Brahmin guy fake out. Traumatized, he takes a moment to come to terms with this new information, the evidence becoming clear as he thinks the situation over a bit more. Finally, seeing reason and probably being a bit embarrassed, he relents, accepting the Slag's offer and welcoming this new economic arrangement in his town, and I didn't even have to shoot a troglodyte. Not a bad day, I'd say. But there is still one thing, the good old Gek. Where the hell is it, Joe? Unsurprisingly, Joe led us on, not even knowing what a Gek is, let alone where to find one. I mean, this man was gonna cut off his finger for us. We kind of knew he was this desperate. Still, stings a little.